So if you're, I don't know, I'm gonna try and demystify meditation. Meditation, breath work, all this other stuff, all occulted knowledge, all occulted science is fundamentally based off of you not being able to see the medium within which you exist, which is consciousness, but it's also water. So you're in a medium, physically in a medium, and so when people do breath meditation or exercise, usually they're focused on getting to a location in the medium where the currents are going the way that they like, or the currents are doing what they're wanting to do, or they're able to like see particular things, so they exist at a particular depth. So most meditative or spiritual practices would be relocating your body. Like, think of yourself as a fish or like as a monkey floating in water. You're either relocating it to where there's smoother currents, right? Like maybe you're in a shore break of consciousness and you're just constantly getting hammered by the waves, and so somebody goes, hey, come over here, and you're like, oh, it's so much better over here. Or somebody goes, hey, get out of the water completely, it's drowning you. Become like an atheist. Like, just get out of the water of consciousness. Or some people are like, oh, you're on land and you're just bored, and somebody goes, hey, come out to the depths. Or you're in some place and there's things eating you. Right? So there's all these different ways of relating with consciousness. And so when you're meditating, you're trying to become conscious. What does that mean? What trying to become conscious, right? You're trying to become aware of awareness. And so when you exhale, like, just, you can exhale by blowing all your air out, but you're constantly exhaling. Your body itself is constantly exhaling into the blood. And unless you inhale, the blood just deflates on its own. It just sort of deflates. So if you exhale and you don't inhale, you immediately start deflating at the metabolic level, at the source of the breath. And that deflation causes you to sink into what? Consciousness. So you sink. Your conscious mind is the surface of consciousness. That's all the things, all the locations. That's the surface of consciousness. So if you exhale, you will fall away from that, right? So if you stop breathing, you fall away from consciousness into consciousness. You fall away from the surface of consciousness into the depths of unconsciousness. And it's not to say there's not things down there, right? Imagine your eyes and your sense organs and everything is oriented on the surface, and then you fall further and further and further away from the surface, and then eventually you snap out of that mesmerization with the surface, and you look around and there's fish and there's terrain and there's other stuff going on, and it's all unconscious. It's all what people call unconscious. It's not actually unconscious, there's just a mesmerization, a fixation on the surface. So that's what it means when you say that you're in a dream state, or everybody else is in a dream state. They're walking around mesmerized. It's just they're fixated on the surface of their mind. So by non-doing practices, by being still, what's the main activity that you do? The main activity that you do is inhaling, so that you stay on the surface. So to stop that activity. And then your buoyancy will shift and you'll fall away from the surface of consciousness. So you can just try it right now. Most people start to have a horrific panic if they fall away from the surface of consciousness at all. So you'll start to freak out and get confused and discombobulated. And if you're measuring yourself with an SpO2 monitor, it'll be like 96%, 97%, and you'll feel like you're about to drown. But if you pay attention to it long enough, you can sort of study it, you can start to very much exist at an oxygen saturation in the blood of like 90% or lower. I have videos of it. So that's, you've sunk into consciousness at that level. People call that stillness. The consciousness is stillness. If all the waves are noise, silence, activity, then the water itself, no matter how much it's moving around under that, is totally still, totally invisible, totally silent, transmits sound from gazillion, it's just quiet. It's like the water is stillness. Water is stillness, but the surface and the movement of water where it interacts with something else is noise. Where water interacts with something else, it causes noise. When stillness interacts with a thing, that's where noise comes from. So as you sink into it, all the same principles that are in the water apply, right? Like imagine that you're in a pool and you exhale enough so that you become neutrally buoyant. Your whole body is neutrally buoyant. And you float and you move and you're sensitive and you can do all. So if you focus, if you become still, as you drop in, the whole body rests on the water and becomes neutrally buoyant. This is called balance. You don't have to, you can find balance. You don't have to fall into the water at all to have buoyancy affect you. There's the same amount of buoyancy is impacting, you're still getting buoyancy even if you're sinking. There's still buoyancy. Anything that's in the water is buoyant. It creates a buoyancy effect. So you might not know that you're in water and be fixated to the surface, but you're still buoyant. And people that feel buoyancy, they feel the buoyancy, which is pushing on all of their blood all the time. That's where the freedom to move around comes from. That's where center of balance comes from. That's where center of mind comes from. That's where being based comes from. Connection to reality is relaxing into the flotation effect of the water, the flotation effect of consciousness. If you exhale a little bit and sink into the water, the flotation effect is totalizing, and then maybe you're not mesmerized with the surface, so that's a different experience. You can be stuck to the surface and turn around and look into the depths, and that's lucid dreaming. So like where you're stuck to in terms of your buoyancy doesn't necessarily determine what you're mesmerized by or where you can look. If you're stuck at the surface, there's a rotational thing to where it's like if you roll over, you're looking down, and if you roll up, you're looking up, right? There's different orientations in consciousness, in mind. So if you want to go deep into consciousness, and you don't want to lose consciousness, right? If you go deep into consciousness and the connection to the surface breaks, there's no one there to have the experience, which is what everyone reports. So the only way to have an experience in mind is either through bringing your own energy supply, an extra energy supply. That's what psychedelics do. Psychedelics are like oxygen tanks that lets you go down into mind. Power plants. The other way is with a snorkel. Snorkels let you go down into mind and breathe. So with a snorkel, you can be on your face, looking down into mind and still breathe. And with a long snorkel, which is what a mantra is a string of rational thought from the conscious mind that's coming down into stillness. If you say the same thing over and over again, it's a string of conscious words going up, and that lets you drop into stillness and still be conscious through the means of the mantra. The mantra is allowing you to remain conscious in stillness, pulled away from most of the surface, and only connected to the surface by a thin cord, which would be the mantra. And that's all of meditation. All of meditation is either feeling more and more and more and figuring out better and better balance on the buoyancy, the buoyancy that the water is holding up everything, a slight amount of focus, which pulls you away from the surface, gives you even more freedom in the buoyancy because you're not, all of you is weightless rather than half of you. rather than the mind being weightless. If you're a body in the water floating on the surface, the mind is the weightless aspect of you, and the part that is out of the water is the matter aspect of you, and that matter aspect of you has no buoyancy to it, so it's heavy. And that's like lifting your arm up out of the water. It causes you to sink if you're swimming. Like if you're swimming and you hold your hands up out of the water, the hands are no longer buoyant because they're not in the water, and that causes the whole body to sink. So most people are like laying out on the surface of consciousness, stuck to the surface, so a lot of their body is matter. If you sit there and relax and allow and fall into consciousness by decreasing your buoyancy through non-doing, then eventually all of you falls into mind, and then everything is conscious, everything is mind. Without a snorkel, there's nobody there to experience that. So the mind has to stay out, and then the entire body goes in. So the mind, like in this situation, it's seen that the mind is unconscious because the mind stays out of the water. Even if there's a snorkel, the mind stays out of the water. It's either in a bubble, it's out of the water and being interacted with via a tube. Like the mind always stays out of water. That's the nature of mind. But the body can fully enter into the water, and that makes it conscious. You have it's all of its like the water is where the decisions are coming from. So everything that's immersed in the water is deciding, which is like another. That's the act. That's true consciousness is the choice. The false consciousness is the awareness. That's the thing that the I is the thing not in consciousness. And obviously everything's tied together into a single coherent system. But that's all meditation, all the breath work is just that. And so people go forever and they'll just sit there and like the instruction they get is just be still. It'll maybe happen, maybe it won't. Good luck. Is your karma there yet? Or do some. It's it's wild to see what people are out there offering these days. It's like I said in my previous video today, it's a grift. Like almost all, like I can find very little wisdom out there that is not a grift dependent on what are essentially fish not being able to see water. And being told, like, this is how the invisible water substance moves here. This is how the invisible water substance moves there. This is secret occulted knowledge. Nobody knows about this. If you breathe in this way, you'll fall into your consciousness. Why? Nobody knows. It's mysterious. Instead of like, oh wow, okay, I let the thing was in the water kind of floats it. I decrease the mass of the object, and then it starts to sink. It looks kind of buoyant. What is my conscious mind? Where is my sensory perception in relationship to awareness as such? Everyone's grift, even all down to like the political stuff and just the normal, normal human condition is based off of this grift of farm raised salmon, I guess. Anyway, so that's meditation. If you want to understand meditation, that's all you're doing. That's the arena that you sit on the cushion, you go, what am I exploring? What am I doing? This. I'm exploring this reality. I'm aware of it. I know the nature of mind. I know where the mind starts. I know where the mind stops. This is my unconscious mind. This is my conscious mind. I am going to meditate, which means I'm going to like swim through it or feel it or maybe float in it or whatever, but I'm certainly not going to sit there and be like, oh, my thoughts ran away. Oh, my thoughts ran away. Oh, my thoughts ran away. Like, that's retarded. The whole watching your thoughts thing is retarded. And without telling you what are your thoughts? What are you watching? What are you watching? Why not just say it? Why are you watching the thoughts? Oh, because you disidentify with the thoughts. Okay, what? So what? Why is that a big deal? Well, because that's the behavior of this environment that you're in. As a fish, it's like that's the behavior of the water. It has currents in it. There's a surface there. And above the surface, there's another world. And when you let out this much air, you sink. And when you have this much air in, you float. Why? Well, because you expand and contract. The volume to mass ratio determines if you sink or float. Okay, cool, that's some sweet physics, but like also there's a whole, like that's just, there it is. And then walking around in some like dreamlike state, like you're not in the reality that you're in, and the reality that is the surface, right? Imagine being a fish living in the ocean and thinking that the surface of the ocean was the world. That's the grift. That's the grift everyone is dependent on and reinforcing and circle jerking and self-perpetuating. Here's how to get the surface waves to look this way. Here's how to get this to happen. Here's how to get that to happen. Okay, sweet. Well, it's not like we don't want something to happen. Like, oh, stop doing things associated with the surface. Again, grifter teaching. Like, detach. It's all, unless they just like heal your blindness, like just, if the person's a teacher of meditation, they should be able to just heal your blindness, like with a word or two, maybe some interactive touch, and then presto changeo, it should be fairly obvious. But no, you need the grift. You need the blindness. The blindness is the cash. The blindness is what makes the gurus and the avatars special.